Shalom from Jerusalem. This is TV7's Israel Tour update. And as we're set to discuss the latest developments with regard to Gaza, with the latest operational plans ahead of a major looming offensive approved earlier last night, alongside other developments related also to the negotiations, the situation in Lebanon, Syria, Iran, and more. But before all that, it's always important to highlight that today we mark day 686 since the Islamist Hamas and its terror affiliates launched their heinous onslaught on southern Israel. Since then, of course, we do still have 50 out of the 251 hostages that were kidnapped on that October 7th of 2023, and hopeful to see their speedy return in one way or another. Of course, all tools remain on the table from Jerusalem's perspective. And to discuss the latest with us are Brigadier General in Reserve, Relik Shafir, formerly an Israeli Air Force commander, a fighter pilot, among others. Next to him, retired Brigadier General Mark Kimmett, formerly a U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for Political and Military Affairs. And last but not least, Brigadier General in Reserve, Doron Gavish, formerly or currently the commander of the Israeli Air Force Task Force for Air and Missile Defense. It's great to see all three of you. And I'd like to start with you, General Shafir, the IDF Chief of General Staff, Lieutenant General Eyal Zamir, who visited the Gaza Strip following the approval of the plans, the operational plans, highlighted that he believes that the war in Gaza is still going to take for quite some time. Is that something that can provide us some insight into the days and months ahead?
I think so. The insight is that there won't be any onslaught on Gaza for several reasons. Two of which are the fact that there are Israeli hostages held in Gaza. We don't know. I mean, we here in the panel, we don't know the exact placement, and I'm not quite sure that the IDF knows the exact placement either. Therefore, the military is being very careful with holding some kind of a restrained power and firepower so as not to hit the area and not get close to the vicinity in a manner which may enact killing of those hostages by their hostage takers. So that is one element that dictates the speed. The other one is that Israel is more aware than before of the collateral damage in life in Gaza, such that it will interfere or impede with Israeli actions, creating public pressure from the outside world. So these two elements require that there'll be a slow movement of the inhabitants. We're talking about 1 million people that the military wants to evacuate from the Gaza area so that it can fight Hamas more freely without harming the local inhabitants. These lead me to believe, together with political elements within Israel, outside of Israel, and the ongoing talks about a final deal that Israel is pushing for, that the military maneuvers will be more of a pressure on Hamas to agree towards or lean towards Israel's terms than anything else. So there'll be a constant pressure, not too big, not too lethal, in order to push Hamas without causing too much collateral damage And that is what we are going to see within the next few weeks, unless a sudden agreement takes place.
Indeed. Well, General Kimmett, I'd like to hear your take on this from America's perspective as well as from a regional perspective. Naturally, Egypt, Jordan, and other regional actors are vehemently opposed to any intensification of the uh, war effort against Islamist Hamas, particularly in Gaza City, where the large bulk of Hamas operatives still exist and provide for some type of resistance against the IDF. The other bulk is, of course, in the central camp of the enclave. But at the same time, President Trump's last announcement, as we also mentioned in a previous statement, was that the hostages, all of the hostages, will not return unless all of Hamas is destroyed. Is that something that, again, we can take into consideration as a support of the current administration in Washington to Israel's intentions?
Well, yeah, you've asked a couple of questions there. Let me start off with the last one. I think that President Trump at this point is giving a green light to President Netanyahu because he sees the quickest way to end this war is not through a ceasefire, but just a very deliberate operation in Gaza City. And we don't, at this point, seem to want to restrict the judgment of the Israelis. The second point, with regards to regional reaction, let's be candid. The troops could go in there with surgical gloves on and do nothing. But the very fact that you're going to go inside that city is going to cause major consternation and condemnation from all the capitals in the region. I'd like to focus on a couple of points that the general made about an operation like this. It will be an onslaught, but as somebody who has personal association with the way the Iraqis fought in Mosul to defeat Daesh, that was old style siege warfare and assault of a castle, for lack of a better term. There were no restrictions, a lot of use of artillery, a lot of use of dumb munitions, and no consideration of civilians. That's self-defeating. The practical aspects of fighting city warfare means that you want to keep as much of the infrastructure in place as possible, not simply because of the post-war calculations, but simply because the more you rubble, the more defense capabilities the defender has. They use the rubble, they use the buildings as far better defensive positions than if the building stood. It's a lot easier to clear a room than it is to clear a rubbled street. And seeing how Hamas uses the underground already, that would just intensify the warfare, give an advantage to the defender, Hamas, and cause more casualties among the IDF. So the general is right. Surgical, precise, keep as much of the infrastructure in place as possible.
Indeed. Well, General Gavish, we hear reports. I was not able to corroborate them, but nonetheless, reports exist with regard to Netanyahu calling on General Zamir to shorten the duration in which the IDF would conduct its affairs and operations to conquer Gaza City. Is that viable? And if so, would that not put more of the troops at risk?
Well, there are different terms, and each one of them means completely a different situation that we would be in. There is when you are controlling an area or fully occupying it, it's different. Control means that you are there, you could be on every place that you want. You are in controlling the main venues within this city and so on. Basically, you are controlling the situation. But to fully occupy a place, whatever is displaced, it means that you've cleaned it from your enemy, and with all the consequences of it, if there are civilians, then you need to take care of them and all of those things. So it is really a question still, I believe, what exactly is going to happen in Gaza. It is much more complicated because there is civilians that are involved, and now, in a way, we would have to wait for some of them to be evacuated out of the Gaza city. So some things are also depends on them, not only on you. With regard to building, if they are standing, yes or no, it's a big question because from the other hand, when a building is standing, then there is someone that could be within this building controlling your areas from the high ground, which is an advantage for an enemy. So do you really want to allow him to be in such area? It could be on the top roof, it could be within rooms or something like this. So there is advantage and disadvantages of fighting in urban city, and in the way of fighting. Are you taking it down? Are you leaving it as a building? We have to remember that once the Air Force is involved, it is even more complicated because if you have a very high buildings, then it makes your capabilities or abilities to strike within the buildings and allowing the ground forces to move forward, it becomes much more complicated. So once again, there is a lot of consequences to every way of fighting, and there is a lot of ways of fighting. But in any case, I concur with the General Eyal Zamir. It's a big city. It takes time to clear the areas. As my colleague Relik Shafir said, once you have the hostages, it is even more complicated. So in general, I think that it might take some time, as General Zamir is saying.
Indeed. Well, I will mention that, well, there are challenges with structures that are built. There are various methods to contend with structures. Rubble usually are more tough to contend with because you don't expect where it comes from, and there are a lot of broken shapes, so to speak, something that every operational soldier within urban warfare needs to keep a certain focus or vigilance to broken structures or those type of scenarios. The biggest issue with structures, in my opinion, and my humble opinion, of course, I have somewhat less experience than all three of you when we're talking about warfare, but nonetheless, in urban warfare, the major issue is IEDs. The moment there are booby-trapped structures, entering in those structures, if those are identified ahead of time, then usually you deal with that structure and collapse it. But if there are no IEDs ahead of time, or there is no intelligence for that, and there are various methods to identify it, it is better to keep them standing. But that's, again, there are various considerations, each one from his own line of sight. Let's divert our attention to Iran. General Shafir, the Islamic Republic, held a major exercise. It does insist that it is, of course, still at war with Israel, so it needs to remain vigilant and, of course, prepare for any development. Accompanied to this exercise, there were a number of threats that were relayed towards Jerusalem. What can you tell us about that, and to what degree does Israel need to be concerned by those type of exercises at a time when, we are still at a point in time where we can find ourselves in a renewed cycle of violence with them?
I think when we look at Iran at this particular time, they're in deep trouble, in more or less dire straits militarily, but also concerning their proxies in Lebanon, where they're being pushed out by the Lebanese government. They're uninvited into Syria, as the current regime is not on good terms with the Iranians. Their connection to Gaza is fragile at best, and they're trying to push through Jordan in a subdued way to channel some weapons into the Judea and Samaria. I think the Turks, who've taken over more or less the northern part of Syria, have always been at odds with the Iranians, and even the Russians have turned a cold shoulder to the Iranians. And to add to their misery, there has been a drought that is hitting Iran and Tehran with water shortage. So, what is left for the regime to show a force is to rally around the flag and issue some warnings towards Israel and the United States while they're trying to find their way in the maze. So they went to the Europeans, who also turned a cold shoulder to them. So they're in real dire straits. And sometimes when you're in that position, you act illogically, which would not really go well with what we know about the Iranians. But one thing that I will recall from 1988, when they were in a position not too far from this one, that Khomeini at the time wrote to his generals that they're in a position where they cannot fight any longer, and they have to capitulate and sign an agreement and develop a weapon of leverage. That's the phrase he used, talking about the nuclear program. So the Iranians know how to count their blessings and call things off or put them off a few years ahead. And I think this is what I would expect to happen. But this is the Middle East for the last 3,500 years. It has not always been something that could be expected ahead of time.
Well, I agree. With that being said, despite the fact that every party or individual that is a member of the Ayatollah regime is evil to the core, there is a difference between Ruhollah Khomeini to Ayatollah Ali Khamenei in the manner in which they approach both their doctrines, then discussions, open statements, but also matters of conduct. So we will have to see how this evolves. General Kimmett, to what degree does the latest challenge of the Ayatollah regime also reflect currently on the woes of Iraq? We are seeing some developments over the past 24 hours with regard to Iraq that raises some concern.
Well, first of all, I think everybody ought to look at that exercise that the Iranians ran and kind of be happy. That was a relatively unimpressive display of military might. My guess is it was more focused on the Iranian people than it was on sending some sort of message of strength throughout the region. I don't understand what you were talking about with regards to Iraq. There certainly is this ongoing debate about whether the popular mobilization forces will become not only officially part of the security services, but actually a cabinet level position on its own. I think that debate is going to go on for quite some time. It's been going on for quite some time. I think everybody except Fallah Fayyad would wish it would go away, but I don't see a whole lot of near-term consequence other than some condemnation from the United States, particularly as the Iraqis themselves say this binds the popular mobilization forces closer to the government than the sort of loose affiliation they enjoy now.
And what about Sulaymaniyah, the latest developments there, which a number of countries, including Turkey and even Syria, have released statements saying that they are closely monitoring the situation and are very worried about the situation deteriorating in that region of Iraq.
Are you talking about the family fight between the Talibanis?
Sure.
Oh gosh, that's been going on for years. The whole issue was not necessarily an inter-family fight, but more that the Barzanis had now bought off Lahore, who really is outside of the political spectrum ever since Bothell took control of the PUK a couple of years ago. I think any country that is issuing condemnation doesn't really understand the inconsequence of what's going on there. In fact, I was asked for some advice this morning about whether the president of Iraq, who is from Sulaymaniyah and married to Jalal Talabani's, the two of them married sisters. They asked me, well, what should he say? And I said, say nothing. He's the president of Iraq. He doesn't want to get in local family politics. The fact remains that Lahore doesn't have the military capability to respond to what Bothell is doing anyways. But that may be a bit too much for this audience.
Indeed. Well, just to put things in context, the Talibanis versus the Barzanis, two Kurdish families of the leading Kurdish family, so to speak. They are rivals.
Yeah, except I would note that, again, this conflict right now is between the accepted leader of the PUK, Bothell Talabani, who is accepted not only by the Barzanis, but also the government of Iraq as the legitimate leader of the PUK party, simply went after a potential coup by his relative, Lahore. So we'll be talking about this in the future, I'm sure, and we'll find out if I'm right or wrong.
We'll find out indeed. General Kavish, we don't have very much time left, and I'd like to hear your take about the exercises in Iran. The Iranians are, of course, trying to signal that they're still capable, not doing very successfully in that context, but nonetheless, we do need to take everything into account.
First of all, I want to say, Jonathan, that I think that General Kimmich is right. The second thing is that, yeah, you're right. I mean, looking at Iran, and as it was said, it was probably more what they're doing is for their own people to show some strength. From a military professional, when you look at it from a military and professional eye, it's not very, I would say, very complex exercise, what we've seen. It looks like more like a demonstration. The Iranians are doing what they are doing internally. The question, of course, with the weapons of mass destruction, where are we going there? This is the biggest question. They are trying still to take their time, but I believe that time will get to this point that the West, probably President Trump, will tell them, okay, guys, let's talk timetables because it can't go like this forever, and there are consequences for your behavior. From the Israeli point of view, you know, it's quite simple. We prepare ourselves to all the options as we did in the past. We are just more experienced in how to fight the Iranian, for sure the Israeli Air Force, who held the air supremacy over the skies of Iran. All our defense forces are more capable and more experienced, although, of course, there is a process of lesson learned. We take them seriously. We know that at least in this area of missiles and UAVs and so on, they do still have capabilities So we always take it seriously. So the bottom line is, I believe that it would be a time that this would be cut by probably President Trump, and then from the Israeli side, all the options are on the table.
Indeed. Well, we don't have any time left, but I will use the final couple of seconds to just point out about an interesting developing story. Turkey has announced that it will no longer allow ships to port in Israel. What basically happened following the atrocities of October 7th, at some point, the Turkish president, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, came out and decided no longer to allow exports to Israel. Nevertheless, Turkish ships continued to deliver goods through Israeli ports to the Palestinian Authority, which then the Palestinian Authority and the traders there were very happy to sell with a surplus some of those goods to Israel. This has come to an end now since the Houthis, the Iranian proxy Ansar Allah in Yemen, has announced that if Turkey continues to port in Israeli ports, they will be targeted. So this has now brought about a scenario in which the Iranians and their proxies are frustrating countries like Turkey to deliver goods to the Palestinians. Ironic, I know, but nonetheless, sometimes those type of situations do evolve this way. I'd like to immediately thank General Kimmett, General Shafir, and General Gavish for all of your insights. I'd like also to thank all of you at home as well. Until our next edition of TV7 Israel, our war update from here in Jerusalem. Shalom.
My name is Doron Gavish, and my background, 30 years of serving in the Israeli Air Force. My last job, I was the commander of the Israeli Air and Missile Defense during the introduction of the Iron Dome to the defense of Israel. All of this allows me really to be part of the team here in TV7. It is super important to have such a platform. We talk about the global situation, we talk about Israel and those different angles which are relevant to the discussion.